Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 23rd of August 2018. Now let us begin. Now we've taken this article from page 11. Now what we'll do with regards to this article is first understand what is the quadrilateral grouping, and after that we'll try to understand as to what this article talks about. Now the quadrilateral group or Quad consists of India, Japan, Australia and the United States. And this grouping is considered as an informal grouping, meaning that there is no established institution, structure, common vision that has been given out by this quadrilateral group, wherein this quadrilateral group is considered as a prospective coalition among the four countries, which is India, Japan, Australia and the United States, wherein it is considered that the future vision of the quadrilateral group would be a political and security perspective in the Indo-Pacific region. Now you have to understand that the quadrilateral group is currently only a proposal, wherein it has not taken form of an official alliance or an organization, and therefore it is considered as an informal grouping. Now the main reason as to why the quadrilateral group is being intended to be formed with a political and security perspective in the Indo-Pacific region is because of the emergence of China, wherein China has emerged as a great power in the Eurasian region, and therefore there is a growing fear of China's rise as a global power, wherein, for example, India has opposed the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor under the Belt Road Initiative, wherein apart from this, China has also expanded in the South China Sea and has laid claim to various islands and exclusive maritime zones within the South China Sea, and this is being opposed by various countries of Southeast Asia such as Philippines, Indonesia, among other. And apart from this, China has various border disputes with its neighbors such as India and Japan, and therefore there is a consideration among India, Japan, Australia and the United States to oppose the various initiatives of China in the Indo-Pacific region so as to ensure that there is a balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region. And it is this fear of the rise of China which has driven India, United States, Japan and others to form what is called a collective security arrangement, whose purview would be the Indo-Pacific region. But you have to understand that the quadrilateral group is currently only a proposal, and we'll have to wait and see as to whether it becomes a collective security arrangement. So now hopefully you have understood as to what is the quadrilateral group and what is the main purpose or the main aim of this informal quadrilateral grouping. Whether you understand the quadrilateral group is currently only a proposal of a collective security arrangement that might be formed among India, Japan, Australia and the United States, which might be based on a common vision of a political and security perspective in the Indo-Pacific region, wherein the main aim of this quadrilateral grouping would be to balance China's emergence as a great power in the Indo-Pacific region, and thereby ensure that China's growing unilateralism through the Belt Road Initiative, expansion in the South China Sea, and among other initiatives, do not hamper the national interest of either of the four countries in the quadrilateral grouping. Wherein you have to understand that the first informal meet of the quadrilateral grouping happened in November of 2017. Now you have to understand that the four countries of the informal quadrilateral grouping have not met after the first informal meet in November of 2017, and therefore we'll have to wait and see on how the quadrilateral group moves forward in becoming an official or a formal alliance or organization. So now hopefully you have understood as to what is the quadrilateral grouping. Now let us understand as to what this article talks about. Now what has recently happened that there was a meeting between the think tanks from India, Japan, United States and Australia. And these four think tanks gave out a series of 20 policy recommendations for the Indian Ocean region, which India, Australia, Japan and the United States as part of the quadrilateral grouping can follow to ensure stability in the Indian Ocean region. Now this article has highlighted one of those policy recommendations is that India, Japan, Australia and the United States should oppose the establishment of permanent Chinese military bases in the Indian Ocean region. Now you have to understand that these are policy recommendations of various think tanks, and we'll have to wait and see as to how the government of India moves forward with the quadrilateral grouping, wherein the second informal meet between India, Australia, Japan and the United States as part of the quadrilateral grouping is yet to take place. So let us wait and see as to what would be the policy of the government of India with regards to the quadrilateral grouping. And so with regards to UPSC syllabus, wherein the quadrilateral grouping would be placed in GS paper 2 within the section International Relations, and within the subsection Global Groupings involving India and affecting India's interest. But you still have to consider that quadrilateral group is still an informal group, and nevertheless, the quadrilateral grouping would be covered in the upcoming September edition of the Focus magazine. And you can refer to the September edition of the Focus magazine to further understand about the quadrilateral grouping. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 4. Now what this article talks about is the various concerns with the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission. Now the concerns with regards to the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission has been covered in a much earlier video of DNS in March of 2018. So what we'll do is again revise these concerns with regards to the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission. Now the first concern raised by the author with regards to the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission is of the population data, wherein according to the author, the general purpose of transfer to states by way of tax devolution are meant to enable the states so as to provide them comparable levels of public service and at comparable tax efforts. However, according to the author, the use of only 1971 or the 2011 census data has and would result in unwarranted losers and gainers, and therefore the use of either of the census data has no justification as a factor to achieve economic objectives for the current population. Now the second concern raised by the author is with regards to fiscal federalism. The first is whether revenue deficit grants would be provided at all. The second is with regards to the impact of the increased tax devolution by the 14th Finance Commission and how it would be adjusted by the 15th Finance Commission. The third is the imperatives of the National Development Program, which includes the New India 2022, and how it would be synchronized with the 15th Finance Commission. The fourth concern with regards to fiscal federalism is the borrowing of states under Article 293. The fifth point is with regards to the performance-based incentives to states for the implementation of the flagship schemes. Now, under the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission, it has envisioned performance-based incentives that would be given to states on how they implement the flagship schemes of the Government of India, such as Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, among others. Now, the sixth point is with regards to control on populist measures by the government, wherein the control on populist measures by the central government may become a mean to guide state governments on how they spend upon welfare schemes, and what would be constituted as populist measures is also vague. Now the seventh and the last point is the progress towards replacement rate of population among states, and therefore according to the author, some of the items in the terms of reference have serious implications for fiscal federalism. Now the third concern raised by the author is of the national plans, wherein Article 275 enables the Finance Commission to give grant to states to offset any post-evaluation gaps between the assessed revenue and the expenditures. But however, the 15th Finance Commission, according to the author, in its term of reference seeks to reduce the role of Article 275. Another concern raised by the author is that the use of the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission may allow the central government to intrude into state subjects through central schemes by the use of fiscal space, such as the control on populist measures, performance-based incentives, among other terms of reference. Now the last concern that has been raised by the author is that the devolution of funds should not be done on a residual basis, wherein the central government first allocates to itself what is needed for its own expenditure, and then what is left over is given to the state. Now hopefully up till here you have understood the concern that the author has raised with regards to the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission. And so now with this, we move on to the next article. So now hopefully you have understood the concerns with regards to the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission. Now let us understand as to where it would be placed in your UPSC syllabus. When in this article, an explanation with regards to the concerns of the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission would be placed in GS Paper 2, within the subsection Functions and Responsibilities of Various Constitutional Bodies, wherein this aspect would look into the functions and responsibilities of the Finance Commission. And apart from this article would also be placed within the subsection Issues and Challenges pertaining to the federal structure, and more specifically, the devolution of finances up to the local levels and challenges therein, wherein a question has been asked in GS Paper 2 of 2013, which had asked, discuss the recommendations of the 13th Finance Commission, which have been a departure from the previous commissions for strengthening the local government finances. Now you have to understand that currently only the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission has come out, and we'll have to wait and see for the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission. When a question for your practice is discuss the concerns of the terms of references of the 15th Finance Commission in augmenting intrastate inequalities, wherein you would be able to answer this question with the help of this article and the explanation given in this section. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 7. Now what this article talks about is that the Supreme Court has said that states can stop government doctors from taking voluntary retirement, and states can stop government doctors from taking voluntary retirement based on public interest. Wherein, according to the Supreme Court, it is the fundamental duty of the doctor under Article 51A towards his fellow citizens, and therefore the right to practice profession under Article 19(1)(g) is subjected to the interest of the general public for government doctors. And since it is an obligation for the state governments to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living of the general public, they can stop government doctors from taking voluntary retirement, and they can do so based on public interest. And therefore, based on these aspects of the Constitution of India, the Supreme Court has said that public health in India was suffering from a scarcity of doctors, wherein if qualified government doctors choose voluntary retirement, it adversely affects the poor people who are mostly dependent upon public hospital. And therefore, according to the Supreme Court, the fundamental right to retire for government doctors is not above the right to save lives. So now hopefully you've understood the ruling of the Supreme Court and the impact of this ruling, wherein this article would be placed in GS paper 2 within the section Social Justice and within the subsection Issues relating to development and management of health. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 11. Now what this article talks about is the National Institutional Ranking Framework, wherein the current 2019 edition of the National Institutional Ranking Framework is likely to be tweaked or changed in a small manner. And for this, the central government has formed subcommittees to assess the criteria for assessing various streams or disciplines for ranking. Now what is required to be understood from this article is what is National Institutional Ranking Framework. Now the National Institutional Ranking Framework was launched in 2015, and the 2018 ranking was its third edition. Now this National Institutional Ranking Framework is under the Ministry of Human Resource and Development. But apart from this, what you should remember with regards to National Institutional Ranking Framework, especially for your prelims examination, is its various parameters, wherein the first parameters is of teaching, learning and resources, wherein this parameter would include student strength, faculty-student ratio, total budget and its utilization, among other factors to assess teaching, learning and resources. The second parameter would be of research professional practice and collaborative performance, wherein this parameter would assess the publication, the quality of publications coming out of the institution, the number of patents filed, the number of projects undertaken, and apart from other aspects of research professional and collaborative performance. Now the third parameter would be of graduation outcome, wherein this parameter would assess the combined percentage for placement, median salary, number of students admitted into the PhD program, apart from various other aspects. The fourth parameter would be of outreach and inclusivity, wherein this parameter would look into aspects such as regional diversity, the percentage of women, the number of economically and socially challenged students, the number of facilities for physically challenged students, apart from other various aspects. And the fifth and the last parameter would be of perception, wherein the parameter of perception would look into the aspect on how the institution is being perceived by employers, by other academics, the general public, and whether the institution is competitive or not. Now apart from this, what you should also know is that the National Institutional Ranking Framework has discipline-based ranking, where it would provide ranking for law, engineering, management, architecture, medical, and pharmacy. Apart from this, the National Institutional Ranking Framework would also provide overall ranking, and in addition to college rankings. So now hopefully up till here you've understood that the National Institutional Ranking Framework was launched in 2015 and its 2018 ranking was its third edition, wherein the National Institutional Ranking Framework is under the Ministry of Human Resource and Development, and it gives ranking based on 5 parameters, wherein the first parameter is of teaching, learning and resources, which includes student strength ratio, the faculty-student ratio, apart from various other aspects. The second parameter is of research professional and collaborative performance, wherein it would include the number of publications given out by the institution, the quality of those publications, the number of patents filed, the number of projects undertaken, apart from various other aspects. The third parameter would be of graduation outcome, wherein it would include the combined percentage for placement, the median salary given to students, the number of PhD students graduating, apart from various other aspects. The fourth aspect would be of outreach and inclusivity, where it would include the number of percentage of students from other regions, basically regional diversity, the number of percentage of women, the number of economically and socially challenged students, the availability of facilities for physically challenged students, apart from various other aspects. And the fifth and the last parameter would be of perception, where it would look into on how the institution is being perceived by its peers such as academics, by the industry, by the general public, apart from how competitive the institution is. And the last aspect that you should remember with regards to the National Institution Ranking Framework is that it gives discipline-based ranking, wherein it provides ranking for law, engineering, management, architecture, medical, and pharmacy, apart from providing also overall and college-based ranking. Now, apart from this, what you should also be aware of is the concept of accreditation, wherein accreditation is given by two institutions in India, wherein the first institution is of the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, and the second is the National Board of Accreditation. Now, accreditation is given in a form of grade, which is absolute in nature. Now, you have to understand that the rank given by the National Institution Ranking Framework is relative in nature, while accreditation in the form of grade, which is given to any institution, is based on a set of parameters on which that institute has been judged, and it has no correlation with the grade that any other institution has been given. So, for example, let's say there are two institutes A and B which are being judged on these five parameters. Then let's say for this year, the institution B has performed very well in teaching, learning and resources and graduation outcome. However, let's say the institution A has performed well in perception and in outreach and exclusivity, and therefore its score would also go up. But however, their ranking would be based on the score that each institution has gotten, and therefore their ranking would be relative to each other. Meaning, if Institute B got a better score, its ranking would be above A. But let's say if Institute A and B are being given a grade under accreditation and are being judged on the same five parameters for this grade under accreditation. So if Institute A has performed well in all the five parameters, then it may get a grade of A plus. But let's say if the institution B has performed well in only three of the five parameters, then it may get a grade B. And therefore, the grading system is absolute in nature, wherein the grade that A gets does not depend on how well or how bad the institution B has performed. But if they were being ranked, then the rank of A would matter on how well or how bad the institution B has performed. Now, apart from this, you should also understand that accreditation works on a longer period. Winning ranking under the National Institution Ranking Framework is given every year, but accreditation generally changes after every 5 years. So now hopefully you've understood the difference between accreditation and ranking. So now hopefully you've understood the various aspects of the National Institutional Ranking Framework. Now let us understand as to where it would be placed in your UPSC syllabus. Wherein with regards to your mains examination, it would be placed in GS Paper 2 within the section Social Justice, within the subsection Issues Relating to Development and Management of Education. And apart from this, the various aspects of the National Institution Ranking Framework become very relevant with regards to your prelims examination. Now, wherein previously many questions have been asked in your prelims examination based on initiatives that the Government of India has taken in the field of education, wherein, for example, in the prelims examination of 2017, a question was asked on the recognition of the prior learning scheme, where another question was asked on the National Skills Qualification Framework. Apart from this, a question was asked on the purpose of the Vidyanjali Yojana or the aim of the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. And it is within that context that the National Institution Ranking Framework becomes important for your prelims examination as an initiative of the Government of India in the field of education. Wherein a question for practice is with regards to the National Institution Ranking Framework, consider the following statements. And you can leave the correct answer to this question in the comment section given below. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from the editorial page on page 8. Now there are two aspects that we'll be understanding from this article. The first is what is Earth's equilibrium, and the second aspect that we'll be understanding is what is tipping point. Wherein we would be understanding both these aspects from first your prelims examination perspective within the section General Issues of Climate Change, and secondly from the perspective of your mains examination in GS Paper 3 within the section Environment. Wherein previously a question has been asked in the prelims of 2018 within the section Climate Change, which had asked that the sixth mass extinction is often mentioned in the news. Wherein sixth mass extinction is often mentioned in the news with regards to mankind's overexploitation and misuse of natural resources, and mankind's impact on global climate change. And within that context, let us first understand as to what is Earth's equilibrium. Now, what the author is trying to say is that human activity, which, when supported by the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation, led to an increase in the greenhouse gases. And the emission of these greenhouse gases are now causing global warming. And according to the author, the Earth currently has a delicate equilibrium and is currently made up of processes that either amplify or dampen global warming. Wherein the author has given the example of positive feedback, wherein the melting of the Greenland ice increases open waters that absorb more sunlight. Now you have to understand that water absorbs more sunlight as compared to ice, and therefore the melting of the Greenland ice increases open waters, which then absorb more sunlight and thereby increase warming. And because it increases warming, it further causes other ice to melt. And this is what the author calls a positive feedback. And apart from this, the author also gives the example of a negative feedback, wherein the increase in carbon dioxide, the chemical weathering increases, and this removes CO2 from the atmosphere. And this cycle of increase in CO2 and then removal of CO2 through chemical weathering is what the author calls is of negative feedback. So positive feedback is any cycle that increases CO2, while a negative feedback is any cycle that removes CO2. And according to the author, human activity such as burning of fossil fuel and deforestation has augmented the positive feedback, and wherein the earth is not able to control or equalize the removal of CO2 through a negative feedback, and this has pushed Earth's equilibrium out of order. So now hopefully you've understood the basic idea of what is Earth's equilibrium. So now let us understand as to what is meant by tipping point. Now, a geophysical tipping point is a threshold beyond which a system moves from being in a one stable state to another state. Now, this changed state may be considered stable or unstable, but would vary based on which parameter it is being judged upon. When, according to the author, the crossing of a threshold in global climate change, which is roughly determined to be 2 degrees Celsius warmer than the pre industrial times, would lead to various other tipping points. Meaning, let's say that the temperature of the earth increases by 2 degrees Celsius, may lead to various cascading effects. Wherein the author has given the example that an increase in Earth's temperature may increase the number of wildfires, which would lead to destruction of Amazon forest. It may also increase the loss of permafrost in regions such as Siberia. An increase in Earth's temperature would also weaken the ocean in the absorption of CO2, among many other cascading effects that an increase in Earth's temperature may have. And according to the author, if Earth's temperature crosses 2 degrees Celsius, it would permanently disrupt ecosystems and societies and may lead to what is called a hothouse Earth. So now hopefully you've gotten a basic understanding as to what is a tipping point. Wherein if a question is asked in your prelims examination either on Earth's equilibrium or on tipping point, you would be able to eliminate the incorrect options and thereby select the correct answer. And so now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.